Johnny Carson, the man who made an entire nation laugh, was hiding a truth darker than anyone imagined. For 3 decades, he ruled late-night television, charming millions with his perfect smile, quick wit, and effortless grace. But behind the laughter, there was a man no one truly knew. A man haunted by demons he could never escape, a cruel perfectionist, a cold father, and a husband feared by the women who loved him. He wasn't just America's favorite host. He was also its most convincing illusion. While audiences saw a friendly face every night, off camera, Carson was battling alcoholism, rage, and a loneliness so deep it consumed everything around him. He didn't just entertain Hollywood, he held its darkest secrets, and he took most of them to his grave. Tonight, we're pulling back the curtain on the man who fooled America for 30 years. From his broken childhood and failed marriages to the shocking stories he kept buried, this is the untold truth of Johnny Carson, the king of late night, who couldn't control the chaos of his own life. For over 30 years, Johnny Carson wasn't just a TV host, he was late-night television. From 1962 to 1992, The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson became a nightly ritual for millions of Americans. He was the man who made celebrities feel human and made viewers feel like family. 6 Primetime Emmy Awards, a Peabody, the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and even a Kennedy Center honor. By every measure, Johnny was American royalty. But here's what no one saw. The man who seemed effortlessly charming on camera could barely function off it. Behind that warm smile was someone deeply uncomfortable in his own skin. A man terrified of people, of silence, of himself. Even his close friend and fellow host, Dick Cavett, once admitted he pitied Johnny, saying he'd never met anyone so awkward and anxious in social situations. While the world saw a confident entertainer, Johnny was quietly suffocating in isolation. He carried a deck of cards everywhere he went, not for fun, but as a shield. Whenever anxiety crept in, he'd start performing magic tricks, hiding behind sleight of hand instead of small talk. Think about that. The king of conversation, a man whose entire job depended on connecting with others, used magic to avoid real connection. To millions, Johnny Carson was the smooth-talking host who could make anyone laugh. But to those who truly knew him, he was a man trapped behind his own performance, a prisoner of the very image that made him famous. And that image was about to crack. Because the deeper you look into Carson's life, the clearer it becomes. The man who made America feel at home never felt at home anywhere himself. But to understand why Johnny was so cold, so distant, and so broken, you have to go back to where it all began, his childhood. Every broken man starts somewhere, and for Johnny Carson, it all began in the quiet farmlands of Iowa. Born in 1925, Johnny's early life looked ordinary on the outside. Small-town charm, church on Sundays, and a close-knit Midwestern family. But behind those white picket fences, his home was ruled by one person, his mother, Ruth Carson. Cold, controlling, impossible to please. Johnny later called her Lady Macbeth. The kind of mother who could destroy you with a single look. Nothing he did was ever good enough. If he got an A, she asked why it wasn't an A+. If he performed a trick, she didn't clap. She criticized his hand movement. Ruth's love came with conditions, and Johnny spent his entire life trying to earn it. It was a losing game, and deep down, he knew it. The emotional distance between them was so severe that when Ruth died years later, Johnny didn't even attend her funeral. Instead, he joked that, the wicked witch is finally gone. That wasn't humor. That was decades of pain leaking through a man who only knew how to laugh his trauma away. At age 12, Johnny found something that finally gave him control. Magic. He discovered a magician's manual, ordered a cheap magic kit through the mail, and started performing for his family. For the first time, he could make people smile on his terms. And when his mother sewed him a cape, the great Carsoni was born. But magic did more than entertain. It became his armor. Behind every card trick, every illusion, was a boy desperate to disappear. That escape became his addiction. Performing instead of feeling. And that same habit would follow him into adulthood, where charm replaced emotion, and applause replaced love. The boy who hid behind magic tricks grew into a man who hid behind a television screen. Johnny Carson didn't just learn entertainment. He learned disguise. And that disguise would soon turn into the most convincing illusion of his life. The perfect host with the perfect smile, who was falling apart behind the scenes. And the people who saw that side of him first were his wives. If Johnny Carson's career was built on laughter, his personal life was built on heartbreak. 4 marriages, and each one revealed a man who could make millions smile, but couldn't make one woman happy. His first marriage to Jody Walcott began before the fame, back when he was still finding his voice. They had 3 sons together, Christopher, Corey, and Richard, but Johnny's growing obsession with work and alcohol drove them apart. Fame came knocking, and Johnny answered, leaving his family behind. It was the start of a lifelong pattern. Charm them, win them, then destroy them. Then came Joanne Copeland, the stunning Pan Am stewardess who fell for his quick wit and boyish charm. They married in 1963, the year Carson became the most powerful man in late-night TV. But behind closed doors, their marriage was chaos. Johnny drank heavily, accused Joanne of cheating, and when he discovered she actually was, the calm TV host turned into someone unrecognizable. His lawyer, Henry Bushkin, later revealed that Carson broke down completely when he learned the truth. Soon after, Johnny started carrying a revolver. No one knew why, but the thought of America's favorite host walking around with a gun said everything about where his mind had gone. The marriage crumbled under the weight of paranoia, infidelity, and alcohol. Even before the divorce was finalized, Johnny had already moved on, this time to Playboy model Angel Tompkins. When his lawyer warned that the affair could ruin his settlement, Carson just laughed it off. Rules didn't apply to Johnny Carson, not in Hollywood, not in marriage, not in life. His third marriage came and went like a commercial break, but his fourth, to Alexis Moss, was the one that shocked everyone. They tied the knot in 1987, and just 3 weeks later, during their honeymoon in Italy, Johnny snapped. Alexis said something that annoyed him, and without hesitation, he threatened to end the marriage right there on the yacht. "Say that again," he warned, "and this marriage won't last another 3 weeks. 3 weeks, that's all it took for the charm to vanish and the cruelty to surface. Still, Alexis stayed. Maybe out of fear, maybe for comfort, or maybe because Carson's fame was as intoxicating as his temper. They remained together until his death in 2005, a marriage built on control, not companionship. To the outside world, Carson was the ultimate gentleman, witty, elegant, adored by millions. But to the women who truly knew him, he was unpredictable, cold, and sometimes frightening. Every relationship became another performance, another stage where he could pretend to be the man America loved. But when the cameras turned off, the act ended, and the darkness returned. And that darkness didn't just destroy his marriages. It also tore apart his family. Because while Johnny was conquering television, he was losing something far more important, his sons. Johnny Carson was the father everyone wished they had. Funny, successful, endlessly confident. At least, that's what the world believed. But behind the applause and the fame, his real children saw a very different man. Not a dad, a distant figure who lived for attention, not affection. Johnny had 3 sons from his first marriage to Jody Walcott, Christopher, Corey, and Richard, who everyone called Rick. While his audience saw him as warm and lovable, his sons saw coldness they could never thaw. To Johnny, family life was just background noise, something to cut to commercial when it got uncomfortable. Rick, his middle son, suffered the most. He battled mental illness during a time when the topic was buried under shame and silence. When Rick was finally hospitalized in a mental health facility, Johnny had a choice, to visit his son and show compassion, or to protect his image. He chose the latter. He never showed up. Not once. Imagine that. Your father is one of the richest, most beloved men in America, and he can't even look you in the eye when you need him most. Rick wasn't just isolated. He was abandoned. Left to fight demons alone, while his father cracked jokes for millions on live TV. And it only got worse. At a 1987 NBC anniversary party aboard the Queen Mary, Carson humiliated his son in front of executives and reporters. Rick, drunk and emotional, had drawn attention, and Johnny exploded. Witnesses said the host of The Tonight Show screamed at his son, threatened to punch him, and had to be restrained by others. The man who made America laugh almost hit his own child in public. 4 years later, tragedy struck. On June 21, 1991, Rick was driving along California's Highway 1 when his car went off a cliff and crashed into the ocean below. He was killed instantly. He was only 39. When the news broke, Johnny dedicated a heartfelt tribute to Rick on The Tonight Show. It was emotional, powerful, and for many viewers, deeply moving. But to those who knew the truth, it was another performance, a public display of grief from a man who had shown none in private. The cameras captured his tears, but his son had died without ever seeing them. Johnny Carson could make strangers feel loved, but not his own family. He could create laughter in others while drowning in his own silence. And when Rick died, Johnny wasn't just mourning his son, he was mourning the father he never learned to be. But that grief didn't heal him. It only drove him deeper into the same darkness that had haunted him his whole life. The alcohol, the rage, the loneliness, they didn't stop. They got worse. And soon, the world's most trusted man would find himself humiliated in front of the same public that once adored him. 4 years, Johnny Carson's best friend wasn't a co-star or a colleague, it was a bottle. Alcohol wasn't just part of his life. It was his life. It fueled his confidence, drowned his guilt, and slowly tore apart everything he'd ever built. Hollywood knew Johnny as a heavy drinker, but few understood just how much it controlled him. Behind the scenes, his mood could turn on a dime. One minute he'd be cracking jokes. The next, he'd be lashing out at the people closest to him. His co-workers called it the switch, that split second when the smiling host turned cold and cruel. By 1982, the act was over. Police pulled him over while driving his silver DeLorean, the same car made famous by Back to the Future. He was drunk, alone, and out of control. For the first time, America's most composed man was exposed. The arrest made headlines everywhere. The court sentenced him to 3 years of probation and ordered him into a program for alcohol offenders. He wasn't allowed to drive with passengers, not even pets, and could only drive to and from work. For Johnny Carson, the king of late night, it was public humiliation. The man who once seemed untouchable was now just another name in a police report. But here's the shocking part. Johnny knew he had a problem. In a rare 1977 interview with 60 Minutes, he admitted it openly. He said, "There was a time when I drank, and I didn't handle it very well." Even in confession, he kept that trademark calm. But behind those words was a man drowning quietly in his own denial. The alcohol made him unpredictable. He'd snap at guests between commercial breaks, insult his staff, or storm off stage without warning. Then, the moment that red light blinked back on, he'd flip the switch. The charm would return, the smile would shine, and the audience would never suspect a thing. It was performance as survival. Carson often blamed his coldness and temper on his mother, saying her cruelty made him the way he was. And maybe that was true, to a point. But trauma explains behavior. It doesn't excuse it. Millions of people grow up with harsh parents and still choose kindness. Johnny had every resource, therapy, money, fame, yet he never changed. Instead, he used his pain as a weapon, turning it on everyone who loved him. The truth is, alcohol didn't create Johnny's demons. It unleashed them. The man who threatened his wife on their honeymoon was drunk. The man who nearly punched his son at a party was drunk. The man who humiliated co-workers off camera was drunk. It was the fuel behind every explosion, every heartbreak, every secret he carried. For decades, Johnny Carson made America forget its problems, all while drowning in his own. And the more people adored him, the more he hated himself. But Carson's secrets didn't end with broken families or bottles of whiskey. Because behind that late-night desk, he was sitting on information that could have destroyed Hollywood itself. And the truth he carried would haunt him until the day he died. For 30 years, Johnny Carson wasn't just a host. He was Hollywood's best-kept secret keeper. Every night, stars sat across from him, smiling under the studio lights, pretending their lives were picture-perfect. But Johnny knew better. He knew the truth behind the smiles, the lies behind the laughter, and the scandals that could have destroyed careers overnight. One of Carson's former producers once said, "Johnny knew everything." And he did. He knew which marriages were fake, which stars were hiding double lives, and which secrets could never be spoken aloud. To the public, he was the charming host. Behind the scenes, he was the man sitting at the center of Hollywood's most elaborate illusion. Take Rock Hudson, for example, America's ultimate romantic leading man. Every woman wanted him, every man envied him. But what fans didn't know was that Hudson was living a lie. In an era where being gay could end a career, Hudson's image was carefully manufactured by the studios. His agent even arranged a fake marriage to his own secretary, just to silence the rumors. Johnny knew all of it, and every time Hudson appeared on The Tonight Show, their conversations were like walking through a minefield. Both men understood the truth, but neither could say it. Carson wasn't judgmental. He was disturbed by the machinery behind it all. He once called Hollywood's fake marriages institutionalized lying. He saw how the industry forced people to live inauthentic lives just to stay employed. And the guilt ate at him. When Rock Hudson died of AIDS-related complications in 1985, Carson was shaken. He realized the system that made stars untouchable was the same one that destroyed them. It made him question his own role in maintaining that facade, in smiling, laughing, and pretending not to know the truth sitting right beside him. And Hudson wasn't the only one. Carson also knew about Cary Grant and his long-term partner Randolph Scott, two Hollywood icons who shared a home for years, posing for fan magazines as bachelor buddies. The photos were right there, breakfast in bathrobes, lounging by the pool, yet no one questioned it. To Carson, those images said everything about how far the industry would go to protect a narrative. Then there was Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy, sold to the world as Hollywood's greatest love story. But behind the legend was an arrangement, one that gave Tracy an excuse to stay married to his wife, and Hepburn the freedom to live her life privately. Johnny admired Hepburn deeply, but he also knew the truth. Her closest, most lasting relationships were with women. The studio turned her independence into a romance, rewriting her story for the audience. And perhaps the most shocking of all, Raymond Burr, the beloved star of Perry Mason and Ironside. Burr's public life was one of tragedy. He claimed to have lost a wife and child in a plane crash and suffered war injuries that never happened. None of it was real. The entire backstory was fabricated to hide the truth that he had lived for decades with his male partner, Robert Benavides. Carson once told a colleague that interviewing Burr felt like interviewing a character instead of a person. He saw how Hollywood forced people to build entire identities out of lies just to survive. As Carson aged, those secrets began to weigh on him. He'd seen the real cost of fame, the loneliness, the fear, the constant pretending. And in his final years, he reportedly confided that he felt complicit in all of it. The man who made America laugh for 3 decades couldn't laugh at himself anymore. He understood too late that his show, his life, had been part of a system built on illusion. When Johnny Carson died in 2005, he took most of Hollywood's untold stories with him. But those who knew him best said that's what haunted him the most. Not what he revealed, but what he couldn't. Because if Johnny taught the world anything, it's that even the people who make us laugh the hardest often carry the heaviest secrets. In the end, Johnny Carson's greatest trick wasn't on stage, it was himself. He convinced millions that he was the friend they could trust, the voice that ended every American day with a smile. But when the cameras shut off, and the laughter faded, he was just a man sitting alone in silence. As the years went by, Johnny became more reclusive. He stopped giving interviews, stopped attending public events, and let his fame slowly fade into myth. Neighbors rarely saw him. Those who did described a man haunted, polite, distant, and hollow. He'd spent his entire life performing, but now there was no audience left to fool. Friends said that in his final years, Johnny often spoke about guilt, not just for the way he treated his family, but for what he represented. He had been the face of authenticity on television, while living a lie off-screen. He knew he'd spent decades pretending to be the warm, friendly host America adored, when in truth, he couldn't even connect with himself. In private moments, he admitted feeling trapped by his own image. The fame that once felt like power had become a cage. And every night he sat behind that famous desk, he was performing not just for his audience, but for survival. Because the moment he stopped pretending, the real Johnny Carson appeared. And he couldn't stand that man. When he died on January 23, 2005, the world mourned a legend. Tributes poured in from presidents, comedians, and fans who grew up watching him. To them, Johnny was more than a host. He was family. But few realized that the man they loved had spent his entire life hiding behind the very laughter he gave them. In the end, Johnny Carson's story isn't just about fame. It's about how performance can become identity, and how a man who made everyone else happy couldn't make peace with himself. He mastered the art of illusion so well that even he started believing it. And maybe that's the real tragedy. Because the biggest secret Johnny Carson ever kept was Johnny Carson. Johnny Carson's story isn't just about Hollywood's golden age, It's about what happens when a man becomes his own illusion. For 30 years, he made the world laugh, but he couldn't find a reason to laugh himself. He was the master of charm, yet he died surrounded by silence. He built a career making others feel seen, while never truly being seen at all. Behind that perfectly tailored suit was a man scarred by childhood, addicted to control, and terrified of vulnerability. He could interview the biggest stars in the world, but he couldn't look his own family in the eye. And when the show ended, so did the performance, leaving only the loneliness that fame could never fill. Johnny Carson didn't just entertain America. He defined it. He showed the power of charisma, but also the danger of hiding behind it for too long. And when he finally walked away from television, he left behind a legacy built on both brilliance and pain. A reminder that no matter how bright the spotlight shines, it can't chase away what's hiding in the dark. Because maybe the most powerful illusion Johnny Carson ever performed was Johnny Carson himself. If you found this story fascinating, you'll want to stick around. We've got more untold Hollywood stories, hidden controversies, and the secrets behind the people who shaped entertainment history. So make sure to subscribe, and let's keep pulling back the curtain, one story at a time.